Welcome to r/Payback.
Some people say revenge is a waste of energy, that it's better to walk away, heal, and forget. But they've never met my uncle, and they've definitely never lived the kind of life I did. One where silence meant suffering, and speaking up meant being cast out by your own blood. This is not just a petty revenge story. This is nuclear revenge. Calculated, explosive, and absolute. My uncle was the kind of man everyone respected on the outside. A charming businessman with a polished smile. But behind closed doors, he was a manipulative, abusive monster. No one in my family believed me, of course. They never did. He was successful, and I was the weird, quiet kid. But I waited. And when the opportunity came, I made sure his lies came crashing down. In court, under oath, and in full public view. This is how I destroyed him. From the time I was 6, I hated going to Uncle Rick's house. It wasn't just the smell of stale cologne or the way he looked at people. It was something deeper. He always seemed to loom over you, even when sitting down. He never touched me, not physically, but the things he said. The way he'd lean in too close, whisper jokes that made my skin crawl. It left scars no one could see. My parents, meanwhile, adored him. They said I was lucky to have such a strong male role model around. Strong? Sure. If strong meant cruel, dismissive, and constantly mocking anything that made me different. He had this charm that sucked everyone in. He'd show up with gifts during the holidays, talk about his trips abroad, pass out expensive wine. To them, he was the cool uncle. To me, he was a walking red flag in designer shoes. I tried telling my mom once. She told me I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive and needed to toughen up. After that, I learned to stay quiet and count the hours until the visits were over. Uncle Rick was the family's golden boy. The successful one, the rich one, the one everyone else was told to be more like. He had 3 businesses, a massive house, luxury cars, and this weird ability to make people feel small while making himself look big. Every family event became a competition I never signed up for. I'd show up with a part-time job and community college plans, and he'd be bragging about a 7-figure contract he just closed. People would nod and smile, then glance at me with pity. My parents never said it out loud, but I could feel it. Disappointment, embarrassment. It didn't matter that his businesses always seemed shady, or that none of them could explain what he actually did. Success covered all sins. And in my family, appearances were everything. I was the opposite. Quiet, awkward, uninterested in money or status. I liked computers, books, and being left alone. And that made me the family loser. The joke. The cautionary tale. Don't end up like him. They'd whisper. Meanwhile, Uncle Rick could do no wrong. But I never forgot the way he made me feel growing up. And deep down, I knew. One day, I'd make it count. As I got older and more observant, the cracks in Uncle Rick's perfect image became harder to ignore. His charm felt rehearsed, like he was always performing. He'd brag at dinners, then glare if anyone interrupted. He gave lavish gifts, but later used them as leverage. "After all I've done for you," was his favorite line. I started noticing how people around him were afraid to speak their minds. His wife, my Aunt Clara, barely talked during family gatherings. His kids smiled too hard, like they were auditioning for happiness. Once, I overheard my cousin say, "Don't make Dad mad today," before her voice dropped to a whisper. His business stories didn't add up either. He claimed to run 3 companies, but no one could name a single employee. When I asked what one of his companies actually did, he changed the subject. Fast. And then there were the rumors. A former neighbor told my dad in hushed tones that Rick had scared off a tenant with threats. Another time, a relative mentioned seeing Rick scream at a waitress until she cried, but no one ever confronted him. The fear was thick. Like everyone had silently agreed it was easier to let him win. That's when it hit me. Uncle Rick wasn't just a narcissist. He was dangerous. And he was protected by our family's cowardice and pride. Something was seriously wrong. And soon, I'd learn how deep it went. It happened one rainy night when I was 25. I got a call from my younger cousin, Sophie, Rick's daughter. She was whispering, crying, saying she had nowhere else to go. Without hesitation, I told her to come over. When she arrived, soaked and shaken, she collapsed into my arms. I made her tea, gave her dry clothes, and let her talk when she was ready. What she told me changed everything. She said Uncle Rick had been emotionally abusive for years, controlling every part of their lives. He managed their bank accounts, monitored their phones, even installed cameras around the house. Cameras, plural. At first, she thought it was just for security, but then she found a small lens hidden in the bathroom vent. She confronted her mom, who broke down and admitted she'd known for months, but was too scared to leave. Rick had threatened to ruin her life if she ever tried. Sophie said she ran after finding Rick had footage saved on a private drive. "It's not just me," she said through tears. "He's watched guests, babysitters, even you once when you stayed over." My stomach turned. For years I'd lived in his shadow, thinking he was just a jerk. But this was criminal, predatory, evil. That was the moment I knew I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. No one had protected me when I was younger. But I'd be damned if I let him keep hurting others. Now it was my turn. I didn't rush it. Revenge like this couldn't be messy. It had to be clean, calculated, and legal. I started by earning Sophie's trust and her mother's. Slowly, carefully, they gave me access to Rick's digital world. His emails, his cloud backups, his hidden folders. I brought in my old college roommate, Liam, a cybersecurity expert who owed me a favor. We cloned Rick's drives, backed up his encrypted files, and recovered deleted footage. What we found was sickening. Hours of hidden camera footage, financial documents showing asset fraud, and private emails where he manipulated tenants and threatened business partners. Meanwhile, I told no one else, not even my parents. Loose lips sink justice. Sophie's mom began gathering paper documents, forged contracts, bank statements with her forged signature, and copies of threats he'd sent her by text. All organized, all time-stamped. The more we collected, the more careful I had to be. Rick had cameras everywhere, even in his office. So we only met off-grid, in public parks or empty libraries, with burner phones and encrypted drives. I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was building a case airtight enough to bury him. The day we found a recorded phone call where he threatened to break every bone in someone's body if they spoke out, that's when I smiled for the first time in weeks. Rick had built a kingdom on fear, but I was about to flip the entire foundation underneath him. As Liam and I dug deeper into Rick's digital vault, the truth became darker and more disturbing than I ever imagined. It wasn't just emotional abuse and surveillance. This man was a criminal mastermind hiding behind the mask of a family man. We uncovered clear evidence of financial fraud. Rick had siphoned thousands from his own companies and their clients. Fake invoices, shell corporations, and offshore accounts flooded the files. One document showed him falsifying tax returns to avoid millions in payments. This wasn't small-time theft. This was grand larceny on an industrial scale. But the worst was the surveillance footage. We found recordings of private moments he secretly captured, conversations he was never meant to hear. He spied on family gatherings, therapists' sessions, and even the people who worked for him. His invasive control was suffocating. Worse yet, I found emails where Rick threatened former employees, promising ruin if they ever spoke up. One message detailed how he'd bullied a tenant into dropping a complaint about unsafe living conditions. A tenant who later disappeared from the building without explanation. Reading through the evidence, I felt a sick mix of rage and relief. Rage for all the pain he caused. Relief that his mask was finally cracking. Rick wasn't just a bad uncle. He was a dangerous man who'd been playing everyone for fools, including his own family. I knew now this wasn't just personal revenge. It was justice. With enough evidence to bury him, I carefully approached the authorities. I contacted a trusted detective who specialized in white-collar crime. We arranged a quiet meeting where I handed over everything: files, recordings, documents, all organized and ready. I made sure to include Sophie's mother and a few brave former employees as witnesses. Their testimonies were crucial. We also worked with a lawyer to draft formal complaints and protect the victims' identities. Because Rick had tentacles everywhere, we had to be strategic. Any leak could tip him off, and he'd disappear, or worse, retaliate. So, we agreed on strict confidentiality and coordinated with the district attorney's office. To build public pressure without exposing ourselves prematurely, we leaked anonymous tips to investigative journalists. Soon, rumors of an ongoing federal investigation began circulating. Every day was a nail-biting wait. I barely slept, haunted by the fear Rick might catch wind and destroy all our work. But the law was patient. It was methodical. And finally, the moment came when everything was ready to move forward. We had him cornered. The morning of Rick's arrest was surreal. Police officers surrounded his mansion quietly, waiting for the right moment. I watched from a distance, heart pounding. When they finally knocked on the door, Rick's confident smirk faltered. The officers read him his rights, and he was handcuffed in front of his stunned family. I heard gasps from relatives who had idolized him for years, their faces twisted with disbelief and betrayal. No one looked at me. I kept my distance, feeling a strange calm wash over me. Years of anger, fear, and pain boiled into silent satisfaction. Rick was being taken away, not just by the law, but by the truth I helped uncover. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, free. The aftermath was messy. Family members split into camps, some still defending him, others finally facing the truth. But for me, this was closure. The man who had terrorized us all was behind bars. And while he rots in prison, I've started rebuilding my own life, surrounded by those who truly care. The best revenge, I realized, isn't just punishment. It's reclaiming your peace. The trial was a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Every detail of Rick's crimes was laid bare in the courtroom: fraud, abuse, intimidation, and invasion of privacy. The prosecutors presented airtight evidence, backed by the testimonies of victims who bravely came forward despite fear of retaliation. The courtroom was packed with family members, journalists, and neighbors, all eager to witness the downfall of the man they once admired. Families that had been tight-knit now fractured visibly, some defending Rick out of denial, others shaking their heads in shame and sorrow. Rick, once the golden boy, looked hollow and defeated. His arrogant facade crumbled as witness after witness painted a damning picture. His own wife testified, recounting the lies, threats, and betrayals that had destroyed their marriage. The judge didn't hold back. When the verdict came, Rick was sentenced to 15 years in prison, stripped of all assets, and ordered to pay restitution to the victims. His reputation was destroyed beyond repair. No more family dinners. No more lavish parties or business meetings. Just a cold cell and a lifetime of regret. The media coverage was relentless. Rick's fall became a cautionary tale about unchecked power and deception within families. For me, seeing him lose everything was vindication. Years of pain, humiliation, and fear finally met justice. But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no one else would suffer like we did. I stood outside the cold, gray prison walls, heart pounding. Today, I was going to see my uncle, the man who had caused so much pain. When I finally faced him through the thick glass, his eyes widened in shock. There was no hatred in my voice, just a calm certainty as I said, "This is what happens when you think you're untouchable." He stared at me, the realization sinking in that it was I who had brought him down. For years, he had hidden behind his power, cruelty, and lies, but none of that could save him now. The power dynamic had shifted completely. In that silent moment, I saw a broken man who had lost everything: his freedom, his family, and his reputation. Before I left, I whispered one last thing. "You should have never underestimated me." His silence was more satisfying than any argument or fight could ever be. That visit was closure, a final chapter written in the story of justice served. The weeks after the confrontation were filled with a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I often found myself reflecting on the emotional toll of bringing my uncle to justice. It wasn't easy watching my family fracture even more, but deep down I knew it was necessary. Sometimes, doing what's right means facing harsh truths. The family split into two camps: those who supported me and those still loyal to my uncle's twisted legacy. But over time, the silence grew between us, and I finally felt free from the heavy burden of their judgment. Most importantly, I began to heal. My relationships with those who truly cared flourished, and I started focusing on rebuilding my own life. Justice had come, and with it, peace. Not just for me, but for the victims who finally had their voices heard. Though scars remain, I no longer carry the weight of silence. I found strength in speaking out and hope in the promise of a better future. Justice isn't always quick or clean, but it is necessary. My story is a reminder that silence only allows evil to thrive. By choosing to confront the darkness in my family, I broke a cycle that could have destroyed us all. Revenge wasn't about hatred. It was about accountability. It was about standing up for those who couldn't and reclaiming my own dignity. Sometimes the hardest battles bring the most important victories. Now I live with the knowledge that evil does not go unchecked when people refuse to stay silent. The legacy I hope to leave is one of courage and resilience, proof that justice can prevail even in the darkest of places.
That wraps up today's episode of r/payback. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to subscribe for more epic stories.